Pop parts are cool, but they are soft by comparison to the original pieces, and they're prone to little dents and dings. There's a little bit of something I'll have to straighten out right there, but yeah, you got to be careful with them. They can be damaged pretty easily. Anyway, back to it. It's kind of dark over this side of the shop, but just thought I'd show you this. I told you there was evidence that this car had been hit on this side, and that they'd repaired it just by hammering out those inner fender wells and substructures. I mean, if you were trying to redo this car, put the skins back on this old car, you'd have to do some pretty good tweaking to get this back in shape. Right now, the hood, you can see at the back of the hood, it's touching over there, and it's not quite touching over here with it shoved all the way back because it's hitting this corner over here. So everything needs to shove that way quite a bit, almost a half of an inch. But so I diagonalized the measurement from there to there where these fenders are mounted. Now they're mounted hard. There's flanges that are welded into these fenders, and there's a hard mount there. It just goes into one spot. It's not like I guess you could shim it out on this side, but then you'd have a problem over here because it's into a hard spot there. You can't really shim it so that it would move over in this direction over here. So the substructure itself would have to be, you'd have to take both inner fender wells loose and shift the radiator core support and everything over in order to get this thing moved over. But just thought you might like to see. That's a little interesting bit of automotive archaeology. Yeah, anyway, that's out of square a little bit, but that's not what I'm after. I'm just after some basic heights and the relationship of the hood to the roof. Alright, so I created a small profile template from about the middle of the roof out to the edge of the hood. This was made way back when I did my Daytona. As you can see, the Daytona hood rolled off quite a bit more than this hood does. That was intentional on my part. I took out all the substructure and then rolled the front end to try to get the nose a little lower to the ground. Anyway, I'm going to use the same template and modify it so that I have a good reference as to the front of the hood and how it should relate to the roof. And that should be mainly the main thing that I need to do right now as far as the front end is concerned. By the way, I might add that this is where it would be nice to have a surface plate. I wouldn't have to have that profile at all because obviously it registers at the back along the cowl, so that it has to fit there as far as how high up the hood corners would be raised. If the car is set up on the surface plate level, you would just measure from the floor up to the corners of the hood, and bingo, you don't have to worry about that profile. But I'm a little handicapped here, so there's ways of doing it with levels and everything, but that's too big of a setup to have to set up for this little temporary thing. I got to know what the center of the hood height is relative to the roof, and that's about it. Alright, so this is the modified profile to fit this hood. Just hooks over in the front, give you the edge of the hood. So that basically gives you the center height of the hood relative to the roof. And then from there, I'll just measure off the car, make sure that both hood corners are level before I start introducing the fenders. So that's basically what the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to set the hood first and then bring the fenders in to meet it on the new car. So I'm putting some bushings in this lower hinge. It's steel on steel, so it's not intended to have bushings in there, but nevertheless, what I've done is I've widened the hole out to about 27/64. Just got one of these universal kits that they sell at the AutoZone. Got some bushings that fit the pin, which the pin turns out to be 11/32. And I've had to do a little relief cut with a grinder wheel so that this little lip is flush, so that this, not sure the orientation of this, but anyway, you get the idea that this fits over it like this. So you have to recess it a little bit, and then I just scrubbed a little bit of the brass off to make it a nice tight fit. The other thing I'm doing right now is I'm drilling some clearance holes here. Normally these are threads, and they're threaded in with bolts from the inside of the door jamb. This is the only one that's threaded in from the outside of the door jamb. Well, the inside of the door jamb is not going to be accessible once this car is put together. So I have to have clearance holes here, and I'll have to put some weld nuts in the jamb so that they all bolt in from the face of the door jamb. I'll come over here real quick and I'll show you what I'm talking about on the door jamb of the old car. The bolts come in from the back side here, and that area will not be available anymore. That's the one that comes in from the front side that you would adjust the door, and then these would go back in there and you tighten these up. So I'm eliminating those threads and putting clearance holes in there so that I can bolt everything in from the outside of the door jamb. Well, that's crispy. Look at that. That's wonderful. Anyways, you know, you might say that it was just a little spruce job with that Bondo, but I'd say that was, here's the base of the A post here. I'd say that was an intentional deception there. This was covered with tiger hair right here because normal Bondo wasn't enough to make the span. So they got that fiberglass reinforced Bondo right across here. That is baloney, and I'm being kind. Well, I thought I'd go ahead and rebuild these hinges, and I still am going to do that. But after I got the first one done, the second one had a worn out pin, so no good putting bushings in if the pin's worn. Second one, same thing. Pin's pretty corroded and pitted, and that slop, it's in the upper hinges, and that slop really would, if you got just a little bit of movement, you say, what's that going to do? But because the doors are so long, a tiny little bit of movement over here in these hinges will make that door sag maybe 1/4 of an inch. And you don't want to be lifting up and down on the door because of some sloppy hinge. So anyway, I ordered some new pins and some new bushings, and this one had a worn and bent pin. So anyway, I was going to piddle with that instead of fooling around with my next move, which is going to take a lot of energy. That's got to be, I got to move this one over there and that one over here, and well, that's what I'll be up to next. Well, that didn't take long. Anyways, got it over here now, and I'm getting ready to see what I can do about hooking up the chain falls to the beams and start chopping away. I've already cut away the upper cowl. Looks like a beaver got to the lower cowl already before I got to it. That's a nice cut. Anyway, that's what's next. Before I get carried away doing anything else, I had to make up these 2 plates. They're out of 3/16 steel, and there's some large oversized holes in them, and they match up with the inside of this location. The plates go on the back side that reinforce the bumper locations, but in my application I made them a little bit more robust, a little heavier, because what they will be is the place where I attach the frame rail extensions that'll come out from the existing frame rails. They'll bolt. I'll make a plate that will bolt directly onto the end of this, where the bumper, the sub bumper, I should say, normally mounts. That's the frame rail going out. So I'll have a extension coming out, and it'll weld directly to those plates. So in order for that to happen, these have to be pretty robust, so at least 3/16 of an inch minimum to support Also, the reason I have to start with that is because that's my pickup point for my lifting bar. I bolt them through the bumper location in the back, and right now that's just sheet metal. That's normally a double thickness to support the bumper. Well, after my discoveries on the windshield bed, it's no big surprise that when I dug the Bondo and epoxy out of the rear window bed that there would be a little starry night going on here. You can see through that. So I'll have to do a little repair work in that area, as well as probably replacing most of the Dutchman panel because it's quite warped up. Anyway, one more thing to do. While I was under here, I just thought I'd show you these two, where these plates are, and they're rosetted from the outside, and they're also stitch welded on the top. Those are the places where I will take a brace and bring it down to the frame rail of the new car. So in addition to the rear window bed that has a lot of pinholes in it, I decided to replace this upper panel too. It was pretty warped up, and it has a lot of thin spots in it that are really deep. So again, a replacement part for that's about, with shipping, is about $450, almost $500. And that would be fine, except for the fact that the way this was all welded back together was plug welded, which is what you do. But you kind of would have to destroy the adjacent parts almost to get these pieces back apart. So I'm going to make an attempt to just replace the center of this panel. It does have some shape, so it's going to require some wheeling. You can see it's got a kind of a curvature to it. But the way it was laying on there, trapped, I don't know whether this was media blasted or what, but it was pretty undulating and also soft, where if you leaned on it, it would pop in and then pop out. So it leads me to believe that the metal's not that strong anymore. So I'm going to replace it with a piece of 035, and that should be plenty strong. Okay, so I went and cut some 035, and I wheeled the center of it in order to create a little bit of an arc in this direction and a slight arc in this direction, so that it just lays down in there. It appears to be a flat panel, but you know, appearances are deceiving. It's got a little bit of a crown in it, and that's because you don't want it to be dead flat, obviously, because you can push a flat panel, you know, in or out, it'll pucker. So if you just got a little bit of shape wheeled in it, then it has a little bit of rigidity by virtue of that shape. Now, what I'm going to do here is the normal thing would be to, you could see that these are the joints where they brought the new drip rails here into the existing structure. So you would have to normally separate all these joints back out, up in and around the backside over here, where this joins to the quarter panel. Like I said, that's all rosetted or plug welded, so we're not going to get into all that. What we're going to do is we're going to leave a portion of the old panel in. We're going to wrap this so that we can have a rigid edge along here that can be plug welded in this direction. Reason being is if I try to put this panel in, because it's so flat, by the time I got done welding it around the flat here, it would be completely warped up. The heat would just destroy it. And there's no way to get in there to hammer it out or fix it, so it'd be a disaster, and I'd end up having to cut it back out. So you have two opportunities here to try and make this panel rigid and keep it from warping. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend this edge down, leave a half-inch lip. Also, I'm going to create the first half of the bed that goes in on a V. I'm going to bend that down and in. That will also create a rigid section in this direction over here, and then I will plug weld on the inside here. It'll be triple thick there because there's an existing bed there, but we're going to clean that out, and we're going to treat that, rust treat that, then we'll put some primer on that before we weld it to it. It's no big deal. There's plenty of triple thick seams around the whole car, and this is only 35 thousandths thicker than it normally would be in an area you really don't see because it's covered by trim. Over here, I may end up just stepping it down a little bit, the sheet metal, and creating a flush, probably about a 1/4 of an inch step down here to drop this down a little bit. But that's not really necessary too, because this is also an area where there's a seam naturally, and this, I just dug out all the mud that was in here. So again, it's not that big of a rise. The reason I don't want to take this out right now is because, like I said, there's a slight arc in this panel, and you know, to try and recreate this is ridiculous. There's nothing wrong with this. This is really solid. This deck bed here, this forward deck bed, and for the most part, other than the pinholes, that bed underneath there is pretty solid. I just want to make it, instead of going along and fixing all of those pinholes, we'll just make another flange. We'll make sure that it's primed on both sides, so that when I plug weld it, it's nice and solid. Anyway, that's the approach I'm going to take. Before I went ahead and bent this flange over, as you can see, the blue markers, we're going to bend the flange over into the rear trunk lid flange. I went ahead and drilled out what will be my weld holes. It's a lot easier right now while it's just laying flat here to drill out those holes. Then once it's bent up at an angle, trying to awkwardly drill those holes out. Anyway, one of the reasons also that I've decided that it's going to be okay to just bend this over that rear flange, and that's this area right here, there's a huge gap on this deck lid at the front of the deck lid where it lines up back here, so it's not going to be a problem to add that little bit of layer of sheet metal there. Alright, so that's the first flange bent over. Then once it was bent over, I still have a little bit of hammer and dolly work to do here, straighten it out and make it up a little bit nicer. But anyway, that's the idea of it, and I've already drilled, like I said, the rosette holes are here. And once the flange was bent, I just hit it lightly with the shrinker, which you're familiar with from other videos, hopefully. And that put the crown back into it because the flange obviously had flattened it out a bit. It would have been nice to have been able to do it in a sheet metal brake, get a real sharp bend in there, but this has an arc to it also, so not possible. So I had to bend it using the bead roller, basically putting it in there and tipping it up a little bit at a time to get it started, and then hammered it the rest of the way over with a hammer and dolly. Like I said, I've got a little tuning to do, but I'm going to work on the front flange next. Okay, so I got this area all prepped up. Perimeter is sprayed with some weld-through primer, and then that sub box that's underneath this panel is cleaned up and sprayed with some rusty metal primer. So that piece was in real good shape, surprisingly. Anyway, and that's the top panel. The center is done with the rusty metal primer, and then the perimeter is done with the weld through. Just wait for that stuff to dry up, and then it's time to install. And it's a little crispy down here. This area right here. Just stick this screwdriver right in there. Yeah, so that's probably gone from here all the way down to here. I mean, I only need I need all of this, truthfully, this whole thing. Anyway, that's kind of a common area for that stuff to go away. Let's see what else I got. This area over here is quite a bit worse, though. No attempt to even conceal that hole. So that has to be taken care of, too. Anyway. Good news is that everything seems to be pretty well welded together here on the edge of the roof, which is nice. Nice surprise. I took this end cap off. It was filled with tiger hair, which is fiberglass. I guess that's what he was using as an adhesive to hold the cap on. And I figured out why he did what he did, because I guess the quarter panel didn't fit too well to this piece. So you can see it's been sliced, this little end cap. See where it's breaking apart already? And then it was backfilled with fiberglass and resin, and then this whole thing was just squoze on there, and that's what was holding it on. There were no bolts to hold it on, and then it was just kind of mudded in. Anyway, I got to dig the other one out too. We'll see what's going on over there. It's probably the same situation. Okay, so that panel's welded in. Time to move on to trying to patch the base of those A-posts and clean some more Bondo out of the roof seams and see what's going on there. All right, I just thought I'd show you what I'm up to up in the front here near the cowl area. This was all roughly cut out, looks like with a plasma cutter to relieve the lower cowl, I guess, to get to the bottom side. And apply some paint onto the bottom side of the upper cowl. I'm not sure, but either way, I'm cleaning this edge off, straightening it out. I'd add some metal back here where he went a little too far with the cut. Trying to maintain this profile here to give me some strength to support the windshield wiper pivots points on both sides here. So yeah, I'm just trimming this off a little bit straight here. This area here might get cut out more, but for now I want to keep the strength in this this lower section here, how it relates to these windshield wiper pivot points. Okay, we're pretty good on this side now. I went ahead and welded up all the holes on this side that I drilled through when I drilled out the spot welds, so that when I put the cowl back on, I'll have some place to weld to that's solid. We had some issues over here that had to be welded up. We had a pretty big hole here that had to be welded up. Some pinholes in the base of the A-pillar right here. And by the time I got done cutting this out, this was a pretty large piece that had to be replaced. Both that surface piece was blown through, and then on the back side there was a second layer that was also blown through. Now, inside, I've taken the time to cut out this portion of the inner kick panel that exposes the hinge holes. You can see right here at the top and at the bottom. So I'll have to, before I can cut this away, so you can see I started my cut right here as far as cutting this pillar away. But before I can cut it completely away, I have to hang my doors back on this car and get an alignment so that I can weld some nuts on this back side so that I'll be able to bolt the hinges up from the opposite side as I discussed earlier. Anyway, moving on to repeat on the other side. Okay, so I got a bunch of holes that I have to patch in this area. I've already patched one here. There's a big one on the back side over here. I just wanted to show you basically what I do when I get to an area like this. It's kind of an awkward little area to make a little patch piece for. I'll take this hole, for instance. I'll take a die grinder like this and clean it out till I'm back to solid metal in all directions. And then I use what's been known as the dirty finger pattern making method, and that's just to take a piece of white paper, lay it over the hole, and then take your dirty finger that you've been working with all day and just rub it until you can see you got a perfect pattern to cut out. Just cut this out, transfer it onto the metal, and then being it's so small, what I usually do is I'll cut it out of a piece of metal and I'll leave a long tail on it and bend that tail up. So I can use that as a handle to hold it in the hole. I'll show you that when I get to it. Okay, so here's my piece. See, I've left a little tail so I could grab it with these needle nose vice grips. and I can just hold it with this, fit it in the hole, and then tack it. And once it's tacked in place, then I cut the little tail off and go around and weld the whole thing up. Well, it looks like this corner right here is pretty corrupted. As I was trying to clean it up, there I saw a couple of pinholes here. And this is how far I ended up chasing it out. Anyway, so I have to reconnect this back to here and, you know, finish patching the holes that I've already opened up before it gets too weak. Okay, so I'm done chasing blowout holes over here. It was a little rough. Every time I thought I was done, I'd find another weak area, so it's practically all new metal by the time I was done in here. This is the piece that had to be made to reconnect this to the door jamb. It's welded up under here. We filled a couple of holes up in here, found another hole over here in the side of the A-post at the base. There was holes along here. I went ahead and welded up all the drill holes for the spot welds, so I have something to go back to when I put the cowl back on. We cut and trimmed and neatened up the bottom edge of the sub cowl. And also we filled that big gaping hole here, and we built this edge over here. And there were some holes on the bottom side here that had to be patched. So that part of it is pretty well done. So I'm going to leave this video right here as it's starting to run long again. Got quite a few more projects to do before we cut this free. It's good to just keep it on this platform for now, where we know everything's in the right relationship, while we still have little metal projects to do. We have to reinstall roof drip rails on this car. Like I said before, this was going to be a resto mod, so they got shaved off. We decided to go with a more stock appearing. So lots of little stuff that has to be done, and I'll take you along for all of that. Thanks for watching.